Now joining me online to, discuss the top stories in the world today is Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. He's live from London. Good to have you this weekend. The Israel-Iran conflict is escalating, with Israel claiming more Iranian nuclear sites and saying it killed the coordinator with Hamas. This opens another side to whether true or not an Iranian affiliation with Hamas.
Yes, well, Iran has long been accused of working with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and this is nothing new. Nor is the policy of Israel to take out individuals. That's for long-term policy for many years. And therefore, in that respect, there's nothing new, except this time it's in Iran, on Iranian soil, which does indeed point out that Israel's intelligence service in Iran is very good indeed.
15. Let's take you back to a conversation we had just a few days ago. Iran agreed to a long-term deal on its nuclear program with a group of world powers after years of tension over the country's alleged efforts to develop a nuclear weapon. Now, unlike other world powers who may have, nuclear weapons but not necessarily issue threats to use it against another nation. And so this, for some, Israel's attack is sort of justifiable in the first place, and the U.S.'s support for Israel.
Yes, there are mixed feelings all around. It is perfectly true that, as was stated in your clips, that Israel attacked Iran. On the other hand, Iran has stated that it wants to eliminate Israel as a state. And so therefore, to that extent, it's Israeli self-defense. The problem here lies in whether Israel, although it made a very successful surprise attack, but it was the correct route forwards, on the basis that it once again finds itself, on the whole, isolated, because the attack was that was an open act of aggression as opposed to a threat. Moreover, as to threats, many countries are threatened one way or the other, but it doesn't mean to say that they immediately expect an attack. Just to add to the problems, it was stated that the negotiation will still continue, and it would appear as a result that there's American connivance in all this, in the sense that by appearing to agree to more negotiations, whilst knowing that the attack was imminent, it fooled Iran and so made Israel's attack all the stronger. So I have a problem here that Israel and America are working together to some degree. The question is whether America wants to go in overtly as opposed to its covert help up till now. Not entirely covert, of course, because it has helped in shooting down Iranian missiles, because Israel can't do it entirely by itself.
Let's take, the stories one after the other. Now, I will take you to what Iran has said. They've ruled out negotiations until the attacks stop. How can that be facilitated?
Actually, there is no way it can be easily facilitated except by one route, which Donald Trump has now closed off. The point was, that's why Iran went to Europe, because at least they get a hearing there. And then as a result, Europe planned to go to the USA. But Donald Trump has stated Europe is irrelevant, to be quite honest. And therefore, the entire route is dead. So there is no facilitation, because that's not what Donald Trump wants now. He has talked openly of unconditional surrender. He wants the entire nuclear plan abandoned. There is no negotiation in this. This is direct demand. And therefore, we're down to quite simple situation. Will Iran surrender or not?
Now, the U.S. president is also optimistic, Doc. He talked about a possible deal in 2 weeks. How visible is this?
I don't think that's the correct reading myself. Donald Trump is caught in a peculiar situation. He is supposedly anti-war, and suddenly he now wants to put America into a war. This means that some of his supporters are turning on him. Secondly, he himself is uncertain whether to go into this war, because at the end of the day, the problem is if it turns into a forever war, which it could, because actually Iran cannot be invaded, but certainly not by Israel, and it'd be very hard to do it by America. And therefore, as a result, in principle, it can carry on fighting. And one of the problems if it does carry on fighting is that sooner or later, it will start to find a way of bringing down Israeli jets. And therefore, the problem here is that if he goes in and he doesn't finish the war in one go, he then will have the double drawback of a war and of him having supporters against him for dragging America into it. So the 2 week pause, I think, was an entirely different matter. He is hoping in 2 weeks the matter will be resolved and therefore leaving America as a threat without actually using the threat. That is how I read the situation. In other words, it's a way out of his internal and external dilemma.
Now, Dr. Marek, I'm going to take you back to the conversation about Trump bringing in the EU. At this point, we can say Trump has really lost hope with Europe on all fronts, especially in the conflict resolution. Seeing the role they have played in the Russia-Ukraine war, he says Europe is unlikely to be helpful.
Yes, the fact of the matter is Donald Trump does not like working with Europe, doesn't see a point to it. Israel has been second-rate powers. He's just not interested in what they have to say. He showed that in NATO. He's shown it in the Russian-Ukrainian war. He's shown it right now with the G7 conference, which he has more or less said is a waste of his time. Actually, in one respect, the G7 conference is, in the sense that countries like China or India have not been invited to participate. And Russia, please note he made this point, Russia was expelled, which means that it's simply America with his Western European and other such allies, and he just can't see the point in bothering to involve them in it, considering that they, frankly, are impotent to change the situation one way or another. So in this sense, the Iranian-Israeli war is like the Russian-Ukrainian war. Frankly, Europe for him is of no use in either.
Now, let's talk about the role of the United Nations in all of this, Dr. Marek. How strong has the UN shown itself to be in the last few years with all of these wars, and how effective are any sanctions by that body?
The UN, unfortunately, is yet another body which has been shown up, but not only by Donald Trump. Right from the word go, the UN is simply a meeting ground. It has no credibility. It can go in only when everything's been resolved as a sort of peacekeeping force. It cannot of its own right do anything really much and never has. So in that sense, the UN has not been put into a worse situation, any worse than it has been. It exists, as it has done in countless conflicts before, to be that voice of stage saying, for goodness sake, let's come to an agreement, which is pleasant to have someone at least saying it. And therefore, to that extent, as a debating area and as a voice saying, please stop fighting, it's useful. Outside of that, it's never been any use and isn't any use now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marek, for making our time to join us on The World Today.